Okay.
Well, let's see. Yeah, dual stack is cool. I'm gonna do some more review. I might have to punt it another day. I just found out apparently my like perf snippets that I was gonna do later this week now need to be done today. So I will also be out the end of this week, most of Thursday, and should be out Friday. I may still be online some, but I should be out. But then just for like a day or two. Um,
Yeah,
but
but
yeah,
no worries because I'm not going to be.
I
I
think
have to do a lot of things, so I'm not going to be very active this week. The thing that I want to tell you is just the only way with current implementation is to start to create these slices and start to add everything. This works. I tested in the CI. What's the main
yeah.
problem is the thing that you need to create annotations, or we need to spawn the kubelet with the controller external.
Yeah, and I'm also, I don't know. So I do want to get back to this very soon. My hope is still to see if we can catch the 1.16 release and have kind ready for dual stack outdoor. That said, looking at the release, I think dual stack is going to be another one of these things where like it's ready, but like it's not quite there. Like
No,
host, like your host port work is still out for. It's like,
the
yes,
thing
we
is,
have dual stack, but IPv6 just like doesn't have host ports. You know, small thing.
no, but this is even worse because I think that Barley is working in the kube proxy, and I don't think that I don't know if the kube proxy is going to have dual stack for 1.16.
So you can, so you can, yeah, right. But you could do single stack services.
Without kube, no, but that's the other problem. You need to patch the kube proxy because if you send a string with a comma separated list, the kube proxy dies.
Right. Yeah. No. But I mean, you just have to have single stack kube proxy with your dual stack, and
Yeah, well,
your server. You just have to do all IPv6 services, which like might be okay if you can have everything on your if you can have everything in your cluster IPv6 aware, then you can do single stack services in cluster and like dual stack for the nodes and like
but
load balancers and stuff.
the thing is, I have a sketch on how to implement kindnet as an operator because that's the question is, do you want to sleep this dual stack implementation and try to move kindnet to an operator, or
I mean, so we do want to move to controller runtime. The question is going to be like what things we need to observe and what kind of reconciliation we're doing and the scope for like we need to scope be a little bit more. I think it's probably fine to say we only really care about this running on time for now. So we also only really care about like say the Kubeatum config, and we don't need to support alternate modes. But that there's also some stuff like something I'm thinking about a little bit more is who's going to be like basically it's nice to have this separation of concerns that kindnet D is the network daemon, but it's also turned into like the everything network daemon. I'm almost tempted to move to a future where Like if we were to make one more breaking kind change where we like actually always deploy the like kind D daemon, and we just decide if it's going to do CNI or not, because there's a bunch of other stuff we need to run, and it's something of a hassle and possibly wasted to like have multiple daemon sets on every node when we control the whole stack. We could just have like the kind operator that does kind cluster stuff, including like external like all the external stuff that we'd want for cloud provider, and just one thing. Alternatively, we might have two, and we have one operator that kind of does all that stuff, and we have KindNet D. But I think either way, that's going to be something of a breaking change if we want to do anything else as an operator, or we have to kind of shoehorn it into KindNet D. So we need to think more about coupling for that. Because we allow people to disable the CNI, but that means that we're also like, we should probably start deploying more stuff for like maybe a controller that does like other stuff, but also maybe that does or doesn't need to be a daemon set. I don't know. I think.
Yeah, but this is the thing. I was thinking a lot about this, and I have what I see when I started to implement dual stack is that we are mixing a lot of things, and that's impossible. That approach is not going to scale at all. You know, it's just spaghetti. So the thing is, you should have a loop for IP tables, and you can run daemon set with IP mask. You know, you decouple all these functionalities. You create another thing for routing, and the controller is the one that has to gather all the IP addresses and build the routers. And then with a custom CRD, for each node, they publish the routers. So the agent in that node should have to install those routers. I mean, you decouple everything, IP tables, routers, and the controller is the one creating the node API with routers, with IP mask, and with whatever that we want to put there.
Possibly, but that also doesn't change some of the details about deployment and how many images we have and whatnot.
Well, of course.
Like for example, the other aspect that isn't in this yet is some of the things we do with an external cloud provider, and what that architecture looks like. So that doesn't have to be explored today, but it is something we need to figure out before we go, more stable. I think we need to leave ourselves room to always deploy some extra stuff. We need to figure out how to best manage that going forward, so that we can continue to further decouple the kind images from the binary, but still have them play well. Yeah, I think we're going to wind up needing something like a cloud controller, and I don't know if that's actually going to be a daemon set or not. There's a bunch of interesting ways you could approach all of this.
Well, so but when you say a daemon set, you mean the controller a daemon set, or what I was thinking is one controller plus one or two agents in each node.
Yeah, but the question is, how many do we want to be running? So like, for example, we may need a very, very cheap process that doesn't necessarily deserve all deployment for like mark the node as ready. And that thing should be aware of whatever setup we want to do.
But why?
So for external cloud provider. Or we may want some things related to, say, storage or.
Well, you are going one step more. Okay.
Yeah, like we're going to need to do other lifecycle management stuff as we make kind more featureful. So
it has
if we
to
do that, it can also be responsible for things like putting the IPs on the node. That solves that problem. But it means we need to take on those responsibilities, like marking the node as ready. Because when the kubelet first comes up, it should mark it as not ready yet.
You mean
Something has to unmark it.
to use the IPAN controller and all, and everything?
At some point, we might have to do that. But I just mean like the issue you were talking about, where we can't tell kubelet to set multiple addresses. The solution, one of the best solutions to that, is to just do an actual external cloud provider. Like if we were trying to ship Kubernetes as like a real distro, not on Docker nodes, that's how we do this. Is we'd want an integration controller that knew, like, okay, our machines are up, and handle that sort of stuff.
Well, but that will be that's very nice, because we can use load balancers and a lot of stuff there.
I mean, possibly we could implement more stuff there, but the question is, what does that deployment look like? What are the controls for? What's the architecture? And that I'm on the fence about so far. Like, one answer to that could be that, like, KindNetD could just become kind of like config for that, or sorry, all the stuff we're doing with KindNetD could arguably fits under the cloud integration. In this case, that being the, like, instead of doing cloud routes or something, we're doing the node. So like you might have a controller do this, or for both of these things, you might have it part of, like, you know, the thing that brings up the cluster. Like stuff like marking the node as ready could be done one-off from Kind. But as much as possible, if anything might ever need repeating doing, we should have it automated in the cluster. So I need to dig more into that, and we need to figure out like if we really want these concerns separate or not. Because, for example, we might have a better idea that the node is ready once we've like got the network stuff booted.
Yeah, but so let me put it another way. So what KindNetD needs is only the cluster CIDR. Well, the cluster subnet, okay? And it creates the CNI config file. It creates the no mask IP table rules, and then it starts to pull the API to create the routers. So.
Right, but so things like writing out the CNI config might be something we want to do before we say the node is ready. We need to compare to real deployments more. Also, if this is joined, then we need to change it from don't deploy this thing to tell this thing not to handle CNI.
But if you don't have this file, the node is not ready because kubelet fails.
Kubelet doesn't, does it fail? I thought it just logged errors.
No, it fails and says node is not ready, no network, or I don't know. This one.
Anyhow, there's a status or a label on the node that we have to remove. It's either, I think it might be a taint. There's like a taint for not ready that the cloud controller has to remove.
Yeah, but it's a taint saying network not ready. Is that
right? So, no. So there's another one if you do external cloud provider. So all I'm saying is we should explore options in terms of like doing a more like wholesale integration controller and what we'd want that to look like. Probably KindNetD is still separate, but great.
No, but my point is, how do we want to move forward? Because KindNetD is very, you know, limited. It cannot do more than it's doing now. It's impossible to. So, but the thing is, if we want to move to an external controller, we can. Do we want to put the KineT features in this external controller?
Right. I think probably not, but we should we should consider it. They're at least going to be somewhat aware of each other, I think. So in the meantime, what I have been trying to land is things to build all of the other features on that are not in these daemons, that are actually in the like the kind command and stuff. And I'm hoping that by the time we release 0.6, it will be significantly easier to debug these things. So the focus right now has been the logging stuff. So if it lands, I think the PR is actually assigned to you. There's some stuff that does things like for messages that are at increased logging verbosity, it includes the line number and the file, like debug line number or file line number. We have stack traces from most errors, and I'm working to kind of clear that up. Ideally, what we want is for things that are internal errors, we want stack traces. For things like your config file, your config is bad, we don't want to show the user a stack trace for that. But we should show a stack trace when like we failed to exec or something. The other thing on that note that I'm currently working on this morning is, instead of just saying like exit status 1 when a command fails and giving a stack trace, I want to give the output always. So I'm reworking the exec code to have a custom error type that includes a lot of information about what failed, so we can display that, including capturing output.
And how do you plan to decouple from the Docker, all these Docker exec thing?
That's going to be by the node interface. I have that in a branch somewhere. I've held that until we have all these other like the exec improvements and logging and debug to build on. So basically I'm building all of our own debug tooling and then going to build the new features on top of that so they have it from the get-go. But it works pretty well. We just like doing things where you need to there's a provider interface for nodes, and then nodes are an interface, and that decouples the majority of the code. But in this case, I'm actually talking about the super low level exec, because we have all the time users will give us like, it ran some Docker command and we got some like error, and it just says like, the status code of the command doesn't really tell you like what failed. So now, hopefully by the time 1.6 is out, we'll be done with, it should give us stack trace for that sort of internal error, and it should give us the like specific output and command, and also the debug logging, if you have that enabled, will tell us like what file, what line was running, which should also help us prove like what version of the code was being used. It still needs work. In particular, it shows stack traces too often right now, and the code that's currently checked in doesn't always get the trace you want. It finds it doesn't always get it. I have some new code in a PR that's out that will walk the error chain until it finds and retain the deepest stack trace annotated error it can find, and we'll print that one so that you get the whole stack as much as possible. But the other thing we need is more work on like I said, like if it's a configuration error, that should not spew a stack trace, because we're just going to get bugs filed that are like kind broke, and it's going to be like, actually your config file is invalid. It's not a.
Yeah, I was surprised the other day when you can use whatever you want in the config file. I thought that it was parsing the configuration, but it's not.
That's in the parser from client, or I think the API machinery. Anyhow, that I am also going to change, but same thing. I want to have better error tooling and logging to go with that so that we can give better output. The other really big thing is we now truly write, it's almost done. I think this PR covers the rest of it as well. we write to standard error for diagnostics, and we write this
Yeah, I saw
out
it.
for actual output,
And
and you
such.
can silence it now. So hopefully with a bit more work, we'll have some good patterns here. And that's one of my big focuses. Like, I don't want to merge any more big features without good tooling to
Yeah.
debug them, because
My question
we've
is,
been way too simple with that.
with this per example, this network inspect that exec command docker network inspect f, how is going to trace that? How are
Yes.
you going to log an error on that command?
I'm working on a thing that can generically, whenever you execute something, capture
Okay,
a
so
bunch of metadata, and then instead of getting the normal error type that we get from the Golang standard library package, we'll get our custom error type that includes a lot more info.
so if in the future we want to use another provider that is not Docker, is CRIO, Containerd, whatever, the logging is going to be in the exec interface.
Well, no. So this is not, this part that I'm working on right now. It's actually not the logging. This is like the error. But when we reach the top and the program exits, if we've passed that error up, we will print that info. Then, like, we'll say that we failed, and here's the error in the stack trace and whatever.
Okay. Well,
Yeah. So that's what I'm trying to get, is the point that, like, we do that now. The problem is the error that we print isn't helpful.
is exit
It's
one.
just like exit status.
One exit status one. Yeah, I know, but I was trying to map it to one. For example, the most typical thing is when they don't have Docker running. What is going to show?
Right. Well, so that's another thing, is detecting that, and that will, the node provider interface will include some stuff for that. But this is for, like, so that's one axis. The other axis is, we know errors are going to happen. Make them debuggable when they happen.
Okay.
So, like, even if we write some code that tries to detect Docker is running, that code can be broken. We need code that gives us useful output. Instead of exit status one, it should say something like, Docker network inspect -f format, blah, 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 failed with this output and this exit code, or with this exit code and this output, or something like that. And this stack trace, so that you know where in the code we called Docker and it failed, because that's an internal error. I am going to work on suppressing these for, like, config, or like you gave invalid arguments, or that sort of thing. So that we don't, so that stack traces are like, submit this to us, kind is broken. Let's debug it. Now, independently, I've worked on the other axes, when we are logging, that, like, it's a little bit nicer for library import, but it also means for us, we get some of the Klog style features of, like, including the line number, but we don't actually have that dependency because we just have our own little implementation. It's pretty small. It's slightly larger now because I made a few minor optimizations and things, but, like, because it tries to do less, like, it only logs the standard error. There's no, like, Klog has all this crazy logic for, like, logging to a bunch of files and stuff, and they probably make more sense for servers, but not super useful for kind. So we have one that gives us a lot of the standard Kubernetes style logging tooling, but none of the hefty dependency.
Well, I will check, because this is too complex to me. All this is stuff with the loggers.
Well, I broke it up into small changes.
Yeah. So,
like, if you go commit by commit, it should hopefully be a lot more reasonable.
okay.
Like, the first one is actually just a commit that documents the logger, so that we,
Because now, okay, I checked it yesterday, and there were only 3 commits, but now there are 9. Okay.
Yes, but they're individual commits. So.
So you were doing. Okay, I will check this now. Okay, perfect. And when is the plan to put these providerless images? Because you merged it in Kubernetes, no?
Yeah, so I have a PR that switches to using them. The problem is It's slower because we don't get the cache. In CI, we get, and locally, if you were to use it, there's Bazel caching, right?
Yeah.
It is actually still faster even for just building the bits that we need. So it's kind of debatable, like how much of the CI we want to switch to this. I think we probably want a Kubernetes pre-submit though, because if we don't get one, then like it's gonna break. So I'm thinking where we're going to get kind to blocking anyhow, we might want to have one of those blocking, it has this huge time gain over the other pre-submits. Maybe we lose it using that, but I am a little sensitive to that because one of our main arguments is that kind is like way faster. So none of the other pre-submits are not using the Bazel build. So we'd kind of be hurting ourselves there. We have other options. We could like just have a thing that does that, or honestly, we could let it break occasionally and manually fix it. It shouldn't. It's only going to happen when people are changing the provider packages, which they're not really supposed to be doing much of anymore because they're moving them out of tree. They're already staged, so like those there are supposed to be legacy, and they're writing new ones in other repos to replace them that are fully external to begin with. So we can definitely ship our releases with these images, but I'm not sure if we want it in CI just because of the throughput cost on testing. It costs us at least a couple minutes.
But why don't you set up 2 jobs with the different flavors to compare?
Oh, so I mean, I have that just by I have a PR that switches to it, and I'm timing it there.
Okay.
So like I can kind of see, like, compare a normal kind PR, compare that one, because kind PRs have no effect on Kubernetes build, right? They have an effect on kind build or something, but like that, not really. So you can see that on average it's trending it to be longer. We're much more likely to go north of 20 minutes now, and it's going to get worse when we run more tests. So I'm not sure if we want this to be the default. I might change that PR so that it makes it possible to do both, but it maybe it keeps the default Bazel in CI or something, or maybe CI explicitly opts into it. Because the other thing is, locally, it would be easier to call that script as sort of a, until we have better tooling, which I'm also looking at hopefully for next quarter, for running E2E tests. Locally, you're probably less likely to have like Bazel and whatnot, but with kind, we know you have Docker, and most of what the make build depends on is Docker. So it would, like, for E2E.sh, it probably makes more sense for the script to default to make, but we might want to keep CI pointed at Bazel, or at least most of CI. I'm thinking more so for Kubernetes pre-submits than kind. I'm more willing to pay time in the kind repo of like slower pre-submits. But like for kind for Kubernetes, one of the whole things is that it's not super slow. So it's kind of bad to pay a performance penalty that the other pre-submits don't pay unnecessarily.
How much is the difference that you are timing? It has to be about 2 or 3 minutes.
I mean, it varies much. No. Like, for example, I haven't seen a job significantly under 20 minutes on that PR. Most of them been more like 23. It's very common to see kind jobs run in like 15 to 20 minute range. On this PR, I've only seen like the lower bound was like 19 on any pre-submit, and
it's about 4 or 5 minutes.
But that's pretty considerable when we're talking about 20 minutes.
Yeah, that's 10 to 25%.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to pin it down because there's so much noise in the system, but like, it's enough that it would be noticeable. And we're already going to be paying that cost in the main repo when we start running a lot more E2E tests soon.
Mm-hmm.
So again, like, it's not that cost is necessarily that bad. It's that a big part of kind for Kubernetes pre-submit is that we can maybe not have a pre-submit that takes like north of an hour, right? But
Like the last
so
time.
like paying something that's potentially maybe like 5 minutes worth of time that the other jobs are not paying is like a pretty poor trade-off for like, well, the images are smaller, or like we get some coverage of this. That's really not Kind's problem to solve. For release images, it's super nice. But
When did you plan to add Kind as a pre-summit, and what in E2E tests do you want to add?
so 116 is like almost at the door, so it's kind of not really an option right now, but sometime early in the 117 cycle is my ideal hope. We don't want to be, you don't want to add a blocking pre-submit at the very beginning of the cycle because there's going to be such a heavy PR load that messing around is bad. You also don't want to do it towards the end of the cycle because you might disrupt the release, and that will look bad and be frowned upon. But if you do it kind of like early in the cycle after the PR queue has cleared, sometime early in that time frame.
Yeah, but what is going to be the regex for the E2E tests?
TBD.
You know, we have there a lot of issues.
Yeah, I'm also debating. I don't know. So I'm going to be floating a couple of ideas around how we can make the actual commands and things easier, and depending on how much everyone wants to invest in that, I might even want to build that first so that we get the really good impression and maybe just get like some limited blocking, like maybe we get IPv6 blocking or something. Because it's still a bit it's still fairly unwieldy to actually run these yourself, and it shouldn't be. So I'm slightly considering that everybody's first introduction to that, maybe we might want to land the things that make it like, one command or something first. Right now, you don't just need to install Kind. You need to like clone the repo and put it in a certain position relative to Kubernetes, like call this script, and right now it defaults to Bazel, which means that it probably will break on most people's machines because they won't have it set up, and like the experience is not good trying to run the E2E tests, and that's something that I will be improving before we do a workshop on it at KubeCon.
You want to what? Okay, yes, because Bazel has problems with the version. Also, the ARM,
Yeah.
the ARM. I don't know what's happening there. I was talking with the other guy, and he just disconnected. I don't know.
Yeah, I need to follow back up with Ed as well. So yeah, but those are like slightly on back burner. This week, in between, I've got quite a lot going on. I'm hoping to get this new logging and errors, particularly around executing things. I'm hoping to like kind of do some planning of figuring out things I might want to work on, and then I'll discuss that once I'm a little bit more confident. I'm also hoping to configure Kubelet to be less error spamming due to containers. I think I know how to fix that. And then into next week, I'll come back stronger on dual stack and factoring out Kind so that we can do tests and more providers and things. And those are the things that I really want to get in. 0.6 is like really good debugging. Maybe we don't have like the diagnose command yet, definitely not yet, but we have like we have much improved like logging and controls and error reporting with like stack traces and things. We have dual stack hopefully, and we start to have like test coverage and like Podman and friends. For after that, I think we can start doing things like cloud provider, really good experience for interacting with it for E2E testing Kubernetes and like maybe the diagnose type stuff for sort of like auto debugging, like just run this command and it tells you what's wrong type thing. But those are all kind of still just like half-baked blueprints, and like stack rank wise, I think we need the good debug tools that are built in the command, like logs and stuff, so that when we ship some of these complicated higher branch features like Podman support, that we have less back and forth debugging it.
Yeah, but that's the question that I have lack of experience. How did you plan to put Podman, and you know, that's the thing.
So I have a sketch for that. I'm gonna circulate it. I paused working on it to fix the error logging and stuff. When that stuff is done, I will come back and then I will share that when I'm a little more confident.
No, well, that you don't need to share.
But
I wanted to make my mind to understand. You know, it's because that's the part that I'm missing. Is you refactor all the logging, but
so
we depend
if you look at most of the code, while it's depending on a concrete node type right now, it's just doing things like executing a command against the node. So my goal is to have a very restricted subset of things you can do, like execute a command against a node, and that's an interface, not a concrete type. And then we have an interface type that does things like, given this config, create all the nodes. So like they're not fully provisioned, but like essentially the Docker run step. So we have something sort of similar internally, but it's not factored out. So that can be a mock, that can be Podman, whatever. And then after that, you can ask it, give me the nodes as the interface, and you can execute against them. So even things like git kubeconfig does not actually need to be probably a node command. We're going to have to diverge those things, and instead it's some type on top that's like we get given a node interface, we can get the kubeconfig with this function by doing exec. So and almost everything boils down to exec. So basically that is a much more tractable problem, and I actually have a really fun partial implementation. When I was trying to flesh out what all this could do, I have a really fun attempt at Kubernetes pods as a node provider. We'll see. But I stopped working on all that because like debugging is so painful right now. And imagining like if I ship all these and people are running in some weird environment with Podman that I don't use and don't know, it's going to be super hard to keep it all working. So strong retake on like logging is a thing and we need lots of it, and a strong take on like we need errors from these commands that tell us what actually happened and went wrong. So
okay, perfect. I have the full picture. So yes, I will try to clean the dual stack thing, and once you have the login and you have this branch that you want a beta tester for Podman, just send me the link and I will do the beta testing.
Great. Okay. Yeah. I have one somewhere, but I'm like I'm super not with it, but it let me try out some of the ideas. Because that's the thing, is like I was just gonna write the design, and I'm like, there's too many little like.
Yeah, you need to prototype on this.
To actually prototype it, right? So I have one prototype, actually two. I figured that might be still like a big project. Let's at least ship the log stuff this time, because also that is a user-facing breaking change of like, okay, there's a quiet flag and a verbosity thing now, and like there's no more like you can silence all output if you want, but we're not going to try to do like error silencing or whatever. Like ideally you don't do that. In fact, most users I think were just setting really high log levels so they could debug stuff. So instead I want finer grained verbosity like Kubernetes does for all of its binaries with Klog. and we're going to start ship that, and we'll need to refine some practices around, like, you know, 0 is the obvious one. That's for things that the user should always see, and they're not really logs. They're just not an error or warning. And they're not standard out. They're not like, you know, we created this node with this name. They're like the spinner, for example. That's just diagnostic messages. So the things you want them to see by default, that's v0. But above that, we need better practices for like Kubernetes has spent some time on this, and it's kind of tilted on like, well, if you're going to debug all of the state of IP tables, that's probably at least, you know, some high V, because otherwise it's too much. And the API from Klog, that's the one part that's pretty good for logging side. It's designed so that for that stuff, it costs almost nothing if you're not actually writing it. It fails out really fast, and it doesn't actually do any formatting or anything. So we have that same pattern. So we can have like V10,000 if we really want. That, like, I don't know, we could put log statements at like every line or something if we wind up needing them. It's not too expensive.
The other question is, what happened the other day? Lubomir mentioned something, a new feature that they have in KubeAdmin. We need to start thinking how we want to carry over the different versions and patches. For example,
yeah,
15 has the control management parallel thing.
Yeah.
14 has whatever.
I mean, that's Kubernetes version. We already do that.
Well, but the KubeAdmin is a bit, you know, it's a lot of ifs. If version, if the other version, we have all different templates. I think that you talk about using customized patches instead of that.
Yeah, so I mean, that's true for some of it, but for things like, you know, if we should do the parallel join or not, I mean, we just have to check the version. And that one actually is going to need some special care going forward, because we need to, something I will make a push for once I start making the like node refactor push is first class support for mixing node versions if you use a config file, so that we can do testing and stuff. And to do that, then we need to be more careful about things like assuming the whole cluster is that one version. That's fine for Kubernetes E2E set. It's another one of the things that it was fine for now, but eventually we have to break that assumption so that we can do like good support someday for like upgrades and SKU testing and that sort of thing. So join, oh, the node version is, you know, Kubernetes high enough. Oh, but wait, all the nodes that are going to join are not. Like, you don't want to be probably mixing those modes because it's got a lock, that sort of thing. So we need to figure out that. But that's another one of the things that I'm like, it probably makes more sense to look at that more after we do the drastic like node refactor and say, okay, this is the new node API, and here's our targets there. Which in turn, like I said, makes more sense once we can debug it better. So I will be sending another commit soon. Probably I might branch the PR or something to add the like, we want execution errors to give us details.
Well, I think that.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of good plans. I just don't want to like get too overcommitted to all of them yet, because like they're going to need to kind of come one after the other, and they probably need some more idea refining for them. But the other one that I'm really thinking about is how you E2E test. That experience is subpar right now. Like testing your own thing with Kind, sure, fine. You run, you know, create a cluster, it's a Kubernetes cluster, you run your things. But the Kubernetes E2E tests specifically are almost, they're a pain. We can streamline this and we can get more tests.
But why did you say that's a pain?
I have a couple of ideas.
I'm using Bazel.
But I don't want to explore that more right now, just because it's
okay.
too many things. I think we kind should probably focus on cleaning up its own code right now, and that includes the node stuff because that will also let us do mocks and unit tests and things. And then when we've landed all of our own internal cleanups, we can start trying to ship fancy features again. Reboot is another one we really want to look at, but I'm not happy with what's been suggested so far. As like, I'd like the solutions seem really incomplete, so I'm gonna like revisit that myself soon. It was things like copying the host's resolve conf.
No, that's
not even exist. Like that's
you cannot do that with Docker because they have something, I don't know, with the file system with that. The problem there is what do you want to do with the Docker network? That's the key question. What do you want to do with the Docker network? You want to use Docker, if you want to use Docker network or not?
Yeah, so we'll probably need to move to a bridge, which comes with its own problems. But those are going to make more sense to figure out when we've decoupled from only Docker. And the current solution, yeah, the current proposal is not sufficient. Of like, we'll just copy the host resolve conf and modify it, and then have two resolve confs, one for kubelet and one for the rest of the node.
Yeah, but the DNS is a mess. I wouldn't touch the result.conf. That's well, you don't know what that kind of worms. You know, that could be.
This is a solvable problem though. I mean, we have several. We should still make kind viable on not the Docker bridge. We should make restart viable, and we can solve that without even doing much, I think. But I want to explore those in detail, and I think that again, that exploration will make more sense when we have like a better idea of what things like Podman look like, where they're not going to have a Docker bridge to specify.
Yeah, that's the thing. I was checking the Ignite project, and they are using CNI. So they
right, but that doesn't stop us from doing this. It just means we need to think about how we approach it and how we make clear, like, you know, like say if that is configurable, it needs to be clearly Docker specific.
Yeah, but you need to move away from Docker network, from the Docker bridge.
Yeah, but we need an approach to the DNS first.
No, but once you move from the Docker bridge, you have the DNS solved.
No, we don't.
Just you do.
No, the Docker non-default network has problems.
Yeah, but that's the thing, is we need to move away from Docker network.
Well, I mean, so for we're still going to have to use a Docker network for the nodes when we're using Docker.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I need to check with the Ignite people, but I think that they are using CNI for Docker.
They're using Containerd now.
They are not using Docker.
Yeah, that's a whole thing. But those are two separate problems, right? We can solve it for Ignite. We can solve it for Docker. We just
no. Finish. Let me back up. So if you can use Docker without their network. Docker can use CNI plugins. I don't know.
Right, but we don't want to be writing CNI plugins to the host ourselves.
No, but they have. Okay, I need to check more. So the problem
end users are very familiar with bridge networks for Docker, and I think we should leave that there because they're going to want to join their own things that are not nodes to it and that sort of thing. We just need, like, this should not be that hard to. We have a couple options for dealing with resolve conf. We just, I don't know, it needs a little bit more exploration.
No, but the point is, you just need a bridge. You need a bridge, and you need to plug the containers into that bridge.
Yes, the problem is that the non-default bridge does different DNS, and we need a better
Exactly. That's it. But that's the thing. But they think, I don't remember now, it was several years ago, that you can do the Docker plugin into a bridge without changing all these things with DNS and
Well,
all
so
this.
I think we actually would like that DNS. It just needs to not um the
I
core
don't.
DNS needs to not inherit it.
But then the problem is if I didn't like that approach because if you rely on the Docker DNS, you are exposed to all the Docker versions. You know, this is
What do you
not
mean?
because you never know how they are going to resolve whatever thing or
Well,
with a
no, well, it's actually very well defined. So they forward all requests upstream except ones to the container names, and they resolve those. That's
yeah,
it.
but the problem is but the problem is that we are going to have some weird user that has to resolve a name with I don't know how many characters and is going to break.
No, because I mean Docker already has restrictions on the container names,
Okay.
and they're not, and for other queries they're just passing them on, and the user's pods are not going to be pointed at this.
I always had bad experience with DNS cache and these things. I don't like that.
Well, so it's not a cache.
It's
It's a proxy that intercepts requests to the container.
I'm sure that they are caching somewhere. But well,
No, I mean I took a
that's-
look at it. It actually is it's not as bad as you think. The problem is that we hit the core DNS loop stuff. Like the problem is that it serves on localhost. If it didn't serve on localhost, we would just use this. I mean, everyone's Docker containers that are not on the default bridge are using this, and it's fine. But we'll solve
I need
this.
to
This
check.
is this is a in a few weeks problem.
Yeah, no, well, this is going to take more time.
Yeah,
But
I think that other PR is like almost on the right approach. It's just instead of figuring out how to actually do this inside the nodes, it like copies the host's config itself, and that we do not want to be implementing, and it also isn't portable. Um, I think we can do this just using the config. We can do this entirely inside the node. So, but again, that stuff will make more sense when we clear up that like the boundaries on nodes. So that's coming. I have a prototype. I will bring it back, but I want to fix the error stuff first.
okay. Well, as I told you, I tested the dual stack in the CI and it was working, but the problem is that we don't have the kubeproxy and it failed. So you need to hack something in order to work. Well,
Yeah, I don't know. It might actually be the right thing then to like come back uh to focusing harder on dual stack when they've kind of, or in kind that is, when we've figured out some more of these things upstream, like host ports and kubeproxy and whatnot. So I know there's a big push to be like 116 is dual stack, but I've seen this before. You know, it's dual stack, but like it'll probably really be dual stack in 117.
yeah, but that's my point. Is I think that we should follow upstream, not trying to merge before it's ready, because people will start to use it and it's going to fail, and we have to point them to the Kubernetes issues, and well,
Yeah,
it's
I
not
think
a
it
good
might be
experience.
fine to kind of aim for this in the 117 timeframe. I know
I
we're
know
going.
that Valid is working in the kubeproxy implementation, and I don't know if the plan is to merge in 116 or not.
Well, 116 is supposed to be out by like Monday, so Code freeze lifts like tomorrow, I think, and then they're supposed to just be doing bug fixes.
Well, this is definitely not a bug. So
Yeah, and this is a fairly substantial feature, I think. So I think it's fairly unlikely to land. But it's slightly possible because the recent IP was delayed. But I think we're already at the point where, like, if they didn't have an agreed upon solution in a code under review, it's pretty unlikely to actually land this release, and it'll be in 117, and it won't be backported.
no, this is
So
work in progress. No, I don't think that this is going to make. Let me show
that was I looked at it Friday, and it seemed like there were a few things like that were like, the thing that I need to look into more is just like how critical they are. If you what exactly is failing without this? Is it
with the,
Kubedo that tries to
with,
configure both?
with kubeproxy. Without kubeproxy, you cannot access the services. However, you can use it with what's the name of the other implementation, with IPBS. IPBS, yes.
Okay.
The kubeproxy IPBS is working. I didn't try it. I know that the guy that was working on it merged the code and had a workaround for I don't know what IP table rule that is missing. But he said that he tested in his environment and it's working. But can we use kubeproxy with IPBS? It's just patching the configuration, no?
Yeah. It's significantly non-default enough that I'm not sure that we'd want to do that.
That's okay. That's my I know now why I didn't try, because IPBS. I don't know how this IPBS is going to work inside. You know, in nested containers, because it's using the kernel. I don't know if
I think it's fine, but yeah. I don't know. I'm also of the opinion that something like Cilium with eBPF is going to be the actual end game for all of this stuff. Like, instead of hopping between modules, we're just going to like move. It's just all going to move to BPF. kubeproxy is just going to be slow about it. In the meantime, IP tables works.
Yeah, well, IP tables now has a big issue with the NF tables and all these new.
Yes, but the thing is, the IPVS proxy also uses IP tables. Last I checked.
No, and it does. The problem is that with the new versions, the kernel moved from IP tables to NF tables. And well, the usage space is the same IP tables, just it creates NF tables.
I'm tracking that one
Well,
pretty closely.
it was Tim Hawkins commenting just now. So the thing I was asking to our developers in the kernel, and they just told me it's a problem of the sysadmin. So.
Yeah, the problem is that we haven't been shipping a user space binary to match the kernel module, and IP tables is weird in that, like, normally, you know, kernel doesn't break user space, and they technically didn't here, but because they switched modules, it makes user space really confusing.
Well, they didn't switch modules, so you have both options. The problem is that you need to know what option
They switched the default. So if you have anything on the host that's now, the other problem is that it's one of the few things that, like, it doesn't officially have an API.
No, but well, they didn't switch the default. They switched the
default. The
IP
tables right, but the IP tables binary is the API for the IP table.
Well, that's another history about IP tables. But well, they
that is the only public API.
Technically, the only thing is that you have a symlink to the new and to the older version.
Yeah. So, anyhow, that's a fun upstream bug. I'm monitoring that.
Okay. Well, it's 9. See you in 2 weeks.
Thanks for chatting.
Bye.